In this episode, we're going to go wire in the mic, and we'll put a siren in so we could make some noise. For those of you who haven't seen episode 1, I'll leave the link to that video in the description below. Go check that out. It'll give you an idea of what this project's all about, and I'll also show you what fixes we did to start with. Now, I just want to be clear. This car is for a police officer. He is legally allowed to have a siren and lights installed in his car. This is his off-duty vehicle, which he'll be using for transport to and from work. And a lot of times when he's going to and from work, he encounters an accident or he assists other officers. And he's had some pretty close calls with other vehicles almost hitting him. And that's why in this episode we're going to be installing a siren so his car will stand out and people will know to slow down, making his job a lot safer. Remember, never impersonate a police officer. And before installing anything like this on your vehicle, check your local laws, but all of that should be self-explanatory. So let's begin. So with our setup here, we have a mic, we have a siren that we install in the front of the vehicle, and then we have our box going inside the vehicle. And this box allows you to control the siren. You can add lights to it, which we'll do later on. We could raise the volume. I'm keeping it low right now so we don't hurt our ears. We have different modes, and then we have all this spaghetti which we need to wire up. So the first step is, where are we going to put this control box? The officer who owns the vehicle wants to place it somewhere in the middle here. Now normally you would have a center console or something in here that this would mount to. But in this case we don't have a center console yet, so what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily mount it right here. It's within reach of all the dials and everything. We can get to the mic really easy. The wiring harness will go out behind here. And that brings me to an important point. Whenever you're wiring something, doesn't matter if it's the radio, doesn't matter if it's lights, whatever, you always want to have a plan. You can't just go at it and hope for the best. When you're wiring, there's certain gauges of wire that you'll need based on how long the wires have to be and how many amps you're going to draw. It sounds complex, but it's really simple. Check this out. So let's say we're using 10 feet of wire and our siren's going to draw 10 amps. That means we need 14 gauge wire. So that's why it's important to have a strategy when you're doing all this wiring. In this case, we're wiring up the siren, so it's important to know where we're putting this control box. So when we wire everything, we know the distance, and then that'll give us an idea of what gauge wiring we need to use. So this siren's going to have a 7.5 amp draw and a 10 amp fuse. So we're going to say 10 amp maximum draw because anything larger than that, the fuse is going to blow. That means when we look at this chart, we're going to be working in the 10 amp column here. Now let's figure out how long our wires are going to be. The longest wires we're going to be running are going to be going all the way to the battery over there. So in order to make it to the battery, we're going to run from here, along the side, all the way there. That's about 10 to 15 feet. So at 10 amps and 10 feet, we have to use 14 gauge wiring. Now that we know the length and gauge wire we're going to be running, let's take a look at the wiring harness. So we have our spaghetti wiring harness here with all the different color wires, and that means absolutely nothing without our wiring diagram. The wiring harness connects to the back of our control box via this connector. Very simple. But then we have all these colors here that we need to know where it wires to. And then we have our speaker, which is pretty simple, 2 wires, and then we need to mount this somewhere. And just to be clear, as usual, I drew out a diagram. You can see, here's our radio box, which is that, and our black ground goes to the chassis ground, so anywhere there is a clean, bare metal spot on the chassis, which connects right to that. Our red wire goes to the battery for power. Our yellow wires aren't getting used right now, but they're for the light. And then our green wires go right to the speaker, or the siren, whatever you want to call it. So that's our setup. So now that we got our spaghetti figured out, let's go see where we're going to mount our siren. Our siren is really heavy, so it has to be in a sturdy place. The other thing is the siren is directional, so the sound waves come out this way. So we want to mount this somewhere facing forward. We also want to mount it somewhere where the sound waves could penetrate through. So somewhere in the grill would be perfect. So to get behind the grill, you already saw in the previous episode, just pull that right out. And right behind the grill are a bunch of sturdy mounting points. So let's fit this up. And it looks like the perfect spot right here. So I took the bracket off the siren speaker so it's easier to work with. I'm going to place this where I want to mount it, and I'm going to mark the holes with a marker so we know where to drill. Good. I marked all the slots from the mount just in case we want to use all three, but we're only going to use the outside two. So let's get drilling. Now we'll test fit the bracket to make sure it fits correctly. This fits great, so let's mount up the siren. So I want to make sure our speaker is facing forward and out of the vehicle. Good, now this is nice and secure. You can see this does not move at all. I'm really pulling hard on this, and it's nice and sturdy. And this is the view from the front. I think we picked the perfect place to mount it. Now let's go run the wire. From inside the car, we need to take this wiring harness and run the wires from our control box through the firewall to get to the engine bay. So all these wires need to run through the firewall. So let's go look at the driver's side footwell. And what we're trying to do is find any passages through the engine bay, like this shifter cable right there, or right there with this wiring harness, or with the steering column, so we can slip our wires through. And to be honest, when I'm looking under here, I don't see anything, so we might have to drill our own hole. So I'm going to look right underneath that wiring and see what's on the engine side of the firewall. Okay, so we're coming in from the driver's side here, and we want to look for that wiring harness. There it is. So that's the wiring harness that we just saw from the interior. And we want to make sure there's nothing underneath it so we can drill a hole. So right under the wiring harness, there's just that black sheet of insulation. So we can drill right through the firewall, and that's where we'll run our wire. So it's looking real good. We could drill right there. Nice small hole, put a grommet, make it nice and neat. It's away from the wiring harness, and that sounds like a plan. So now we need to be able to slip all these wires through a grommet. And a grommet is just a piece of rubber. And what this does is it protects the wires and closes off that hole, so that there's no escaping. You can see these wires will actually fit nice and snugly in this grommet. And if we want to add 2 more wires, there's just enough space. So if we want to add those light wires, we can always do that later on. So what we need to do is we need to drill a hole that is the inside diameter of this grommet. And then we'll snap that grommet in, and then we can run wires through the firewall without a problem. And convenient enough, the same drill that we just used to drill those holes to mount the siren fits this perfectly. It's a little bit bigger than the inside diameter, which is what we want, just slightly larger, and that'll fit perfect. But first we're going to be using a smaller bit to drill a pilot hole into the firewall. We're going to go right below that wiring harness, right here. Drill our pilot hole, and we'll go in. Perfect. So now the wires will pass through here without a grommet. The problem is, you can see already, the edge, even though it looks pretty smooth, a little bit of vibration and movement over time like that will chase the wires. So what you do is you get this rubber grommet, which goes right in the hole like this. There we go. Now, when the wires go in here, and it moves in and out, there's no chafing because it's rubber, so it's really soft. So now we have our grommet installed. You can see the light from the outside. Now we can run the wires through there. Now we're going to mount the radio so we can run the wires through the firewall. I was going to put it right here and just Velcro it, but then you see all these wires. What I think we're going to do instead, that fits in there nicely, and we'll have this clip somewhere over here, and then these wires will be tucked in